What does sleeping apart do to our marriages? Is it beneficial? Does it cause problems? If so, what kind of problems? And what are our options? I've talked with gals before. I talk with a lot of gals, as you know. I'm a life and marriage coach. And one of the things that often comes up is this whole concept of sleeping together and what happens. Gals will come and tell me that their marriages are struggling. They're not happy with their husbands. They don't like to be with their husbands. They're getting depressed. Life's not pleasant. And then we end up talking eventually about their sleeping arrangements. Maybe they have the kids sleeping with them. Or they go to the kids' room and want to lay down and snuggle with them and to get them to sleep. Maybe the bed's covered with all kinds of things and there's not room to sleep on it. Maybe the pets come and sleep on the bed and they're so big, you've got great big animals, and there's no room to get close to your husband. Or maybe just one of you, maybe he's a snorer, maybe he's a big man and you're small. I mean, my husband and I run into that issue. He's about 50 pounds heavier than I am. It makes a difference on a mattress, I can tell you that. But what do we do about it? And what's the real problem? What issues does it cause? I'm Joyce Zook, the Practical Christian Woman, helping you love your life and your marriage. This is a series of marriage problems and answers, and we're talking about some of the most difficult issues that occur in marriages that make them break apart sometimes. You know, there are two big reasons why couples break apart most of the time. It's because, one, of sex issues, and two, because of money issues. The sex may be adultery, it might be infidelity, or it might be just not having enough sex, or it's too much, it's too little, it's too infrequent. I don't want to talk actually about the sex part today, but I want to talk about some of the ramifications of not sleeping together and what we can do about it and what it does for us when we do sleep with our spouses. It's a difficult topic, and I prayed long and hard about this. I actually have a girlfriend praying for me right now as I'm speaking and teaching this, because it's something that people argue with me about. Well, I don't want to go to sleep with my husband. I don't like sleeping with him. He snores. My son won't go to sleep unless I sleep with him. Well, I have to stay upstairs with my daughters because one of them keeps getting up every night and has to go to the bathroom 2 or 3 times. And if I don't get her up, she wets the bed. And then I have the little one that keeps crying for mommy in the middle of the night, so I have to stay upstairs. So how's your sex life with your husband? Oh, not very good, she said. Another one said, I just don't like sex. Okay. And you want to know why you're having problems with your marriage? It's hard sometimes to change our habits. It's hard to change what we do. And usually I found we don't change what we do until we change what we think about it. It's like our actions follow our beliefs. If we don't believe the Bible is true, then we don't follow it. If we don't believe that sex is important to marriage, then we don't make room and time for it. If we don't think that sleeping together or figuring out how to have time together in a bed is important, we won't do it. And so one of the things I have to work with you, talk with gals with, and I want to encourage you, is to know why things are important so that you'll want to do something about it. I can tell you that the one gal whose 2 kids, one daughter was getting up in the middle of the night and the other one was asking for mommy all the time. We worked through those issues and we figured out how she could resolve the issues with her daughter getting wet and what she could do about it. We worked through the issues of what she could do about her little one going up. I didn't say just ignore them. We actually worked through how to solve some of the problems with it. How did she deal with the daughter that was incontinent? What could she do? How could she deal with the little one that was crying for in the middle of the night? And then talked about spending time in the bed with her husband. And why was that uncomfortable? Why she couldn't sleep? How was she going to get confident that her kids were okay so that she could sleep there with her husband? So we had to work through some of those fears. There's a lot of reasons why we don't do these things, and I understand that, and I don't want to be mean. And I don't want you to think me not an understanding, caring person. But not sleeping with our husbands is a big problem. I was doing some research, and I found out that 25% of the American people don't sleep with their husband, don't sleep with their spouse. Bad or good? I don't know what it is. I do know that there's some challenges when we don't sleep with our spouse. And I want to talk about some of those. I also want to talk about some of the issues that will keep us from sleeping with them and some of the things we can do about it. So what do we do when we don't sleep together? It's a difficult topic. Not sleeping together actually puts distance between husbands and wives. I've told you about these gals that were depressed, decide they don't like their husbands, don't like marriage, can't understand why he's cranky all the time, kind of understand why he doesn't want to spend time with them. Gals, I know that sex is usually not as important to us as it is to our men, but realize it is a significant and important part of our marriages. In my book, 12 Keys for Marriage Success, in chapter 12, which is Light the Fire, which is the one on sex, I have a quote in here, and I'm going to try to find it for you, about what we do, about what the importance is of sex in our marriages. And I don't see it right off the bat. Okay, I thought I had it here right there. I could just turn to it. Oh, here it is. Barry and Emily McCarthy are two doctors that have studied this, and they say, sexuality is not the most important factor in a marriage, but it is integral to a successful marriage. Let me just restate that. Sexuality is not the most important factor in a marriage, but it is integral to a successful marriage. When sex goes well, it contributes 5 to 10% of the marriage, energizing the marital bond and making it special. When sex is problematic, it drains most positive feelings. In marriages where sex is dysfunctional or non-existent, it becomes 50 to 70% of the relationship, draining the marriage of intimacy and fidelity. Let me read that last sentence to you again. In marriages where sex is dysfunctional or non-existent, it becomes 50 to 70% of the relationship, draining the marriage of intimacy and vitality. So what happens when we don't sleep apart? When we sleep apart? Well, first off, we don't have time to snuggle and cuddle. Most couples, particularly when there's children in the home, will do a lot of their talking in bed at night as they snuggle and cuddle or they get ready for bed. And they'll lay there and they'll talk. They used to call it pillow talk and share the different things that have been happening. It's a great time to pray with your spouse. My husband and I pray every night together. And we sometimes bare our real hearts, our true feelings, and not just praying for the kids and the grandkids, but we're baring our hearts and our thoughts. It's difficult. Sometimes you're mad and angry at each other. You don't want to sleep together. But working those things out so that you can. You may have other reasons you can't, and some of those can be worked through. But that time of snuggling and cuddling, I want to read you some facts here because I just don't want you just to be believing me. Because people say, oh, that's just Joyce. She has a great marriage. And I do. I do have a great marriage. But I also work with women who are struggling in their marriage. I wanted to tell you about those gals, that gal who had 2 kids that were keeping her up at night. And she wasn't sleeping the night. First off, not sleeping got her very, very depressed. And so she needed to get more sleep. The other one was that her relationship with her husband was failing. So we helped her work out the kids' issues. We helped her get more sleep. And then they went away on a vacation, and Grandma and Grandpa watched the kids for an overnight. And she called me up and she said, Joyce, we had a wonderful vacation for 2. And my life is back together again with my hubby. We can work through it. Most of them can be worked through in one situation or another. In many ways, physical health and mental health, well-being will start and end with our sleep. So first off, we need a good night's sleep. That's kind of thing. But then also, we need that time of snuggling and cuddling. Bedtime is often the only time that couples talk and bond with each other. And since sex before bedtime is found to lead to healthier sleep. Now, I know. Let me just talk about that one a minute. Sex before bedtime. I was talking with one gal, and we had we'd gone through her priorities in her life, and we had come up to the place we were talking about where her husband was in her priorities. And she told me, he's not on my list. He's not even on the list. He's not a priority at all. So we talked about her bedtime routine. And her bedtime routine was to go into the bathroom and do her facial and do all this stuff and wait the 10 minutes or whatever and do some other things. And it probably took her a good 15, 20 minutes to get to bed. And when she got to bed, her husband was asleep. And I said, well, how is your sex life? I said, is your husband satisfied? Because she was satisfied with it. He said, no, he wants me to come to bed with him. She said, but every time I go to bed with him, as soon as we have sex, he falls asleep. Very common, gals, very, very common. If that's your case in your home, that's very, very common. I know in our home, my husband will fall asleep, and I'm all excited. I get this all adrenaline going when we fall. So anyway, too much TMI, too much information. But anyway, either one can happen. But she said that her husband fell asleep. I said, so what about this? If you go to bed with him, fulfill his sexual needs, and you sleep there and you cuddle, and then once he falls asleep, you can get up and go to the bathroom and do your whole routine, and he won't even know you did it. She goes, I'm going to try it. And you know what? Their marriage improved. That one thing drastically improved their marriage. He stopped being so irritated with her. She stopped being so mad at him, because we get to fighting over this whole thing. But she had to figure out a better bedtime routine that met her husband's needs and her needs. Someone else told me they weren't sleeping well in their bed, therefore they didn't want to be there, because they had these high lights up above at the top of the wall, and all this light was coming in. So she couldn't sleep in there, so she slept someplace else. I said, what can you do to cover up those lights or those windows? She goes, oh, I guess I could figure that out. She did. She started getting better sleep, and her relationships with her husband improved. So our sleep does improve our sexual relationships, and sleep improves our general health. So what are some other things? The more serious setbacks occur when we don't get enough sleep, and then our sex life. I'm reading this actually for you gals. It's from this online blog that I found. It's the blog is from Psychology Today, and it's on should you sleep in the same bed as your partner. Okay, so a 2005 study published in the Journal of Circadian Rhythms, that's the natural body rhythms we have, found that married couples have the most sex at bedtime between the hours of 11 p.m. and 1. That may or may not be you, but that's the time that most couples have sex is between 11 p.m. and 1. So if you're not sleeping in the same bed, then often the sex disappears. Now, that doesn't mean you can't make arrangements for it and make arrangements to have sex, but it does disappear. They found that married couples, aside from sex, the actual cuddling before at nighttime is going to sleep and cuddling after sex plays a vital part in feeling of intimacy and connectedness. Cuddling improves our sex life. One of the challenges I like to give the gals when I teach a Bible study, and here's maybe a great challenge for you. I want to challenge you to touch your husband for 20 minutes a day. This is my challenge. Touch your husband for 20 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be in bed. It might be on the couch. It might be as you're walking and taking a walk together, you're holding hands. It might be you give him a back rub. It might be, I don't know, you figure out how can you touch your husband for 20 minutes a day and see what happens to your marriage. I suggested this to one of the Bible studies I was teaching on the very first class we had, and I said, because they were all talking about how their husbands had all these complaints, and I said, okay, I want you to touch your husband for 20 minutes a day. And they kind of looked at me like going, Joyce, you want me to do what? I said, yes, I want you to touch your husband for 20 minutes a day. And you know what happened? Their marriages started to change because they had that physical connection. Am I just talking out of the top of my head, or is this also in the Bible? It's in the Bible, gals. 1 Corinthians chapter 7 says to not deprive each other of sexual relations unless for a time of prayer, and then you are to come back together again. Now, some of you may have been praying for months, or you may have been praying for years, but let me ask you, was it an agreed upon time of prayer? If not, we need to work through some of these issues. So what do we do? What can we do? I hope I've convinced you that sleeping together does keep a marriage strong. Now let's talk about some of the reasons why we might not sleep together and what we can do about it. One of the interesting things was when we were in Germany, my husband and I, we would travel. We spent 9 years in Germany with the military. My husband was in the military for over 30 years, and so for over 9 years of that time, we lived in Europe, and Germany in particular. And as we travel and go places, we get little guest houses or whatnot. And we discovered that the Europeans, okay, Rhonda's asking a great question here. Does it have to be all at once, 20 minutes of touching? No, you can do it in little bits and pieces. And it might be you take a walk, or you sit and rub his back for 5 minutes, and then you're going to hold hands while you take a short walk. Maybe you go dry his back after a shower. Maybe then you snuggle for 5 or 10 minutes in the bed. Yes, it can be spread out. But yes, good question, Rhonda. How should we spend that 20 minutes? It can be all at once, or it can be spread out. For many couples, the easiest time to snuggle is as they go to sleep in bed. Let's talk. I'm going to go back to my story in Germany. In Germany, we'd visit these guest houses, and they actually had what we would call California king beds. Now, they put 2 twins together. I'm trying to show you this. It's hard for me to get the camera angles right. 2 twins together. And often they were made with separate sheets. The beds fit right together, very close. There was no space in between, no hard board in between. The beds just fit close together. And there was 2 comforters on the top. Now, my husband thought this was so that you could have 2 single people stay in the same room. But my thought was, how comfortable for a married couple to sleep side by side. They could snuggle. They could have sex. Or they aren't disturbing each other's sleep. He can throw the covers off because he's so hot, and she can pull them up tight. I like to sleep with the cover over my head when I go to sleep, and then I pull it down. My husband likes it down below his chin. So our covers are like squatty wampus, like this. But their beds were side by side. So when we came back from Germany after 9 years, we moved first off to Washington, D.C., and my back had issues, and my husband had major back issues. And we found that when we slept in our bed, both of us were very sore. We had been sleeping in a full-size bed, and it had moved to a queen bed, and we just weren't very comfortable. So we decided to invest in an expensive bed that was actually more like the German beds. It's 2 beds hooked together called the California King. We did not put separate sheets on them. We put 1 sheet. But maybe at first we did put 2 separate sheets because we actually got the fancy one that was like a hospital bed, so we could have the feet and the head and the back at different levels. Now we've got one where we could do that, but actually it's so that we can each adjust the lumbar area and the head and the toes. Why? Because we both do still have back issues, and both of us find different things comfortable. Here's another thing that happens. We would go on vacation here in the States to a favorite vacation spot, and we'd sleep on the bed, and we'd lay down, and I was fine because I usually went to sleep a little early before he did, and I'm right here. And then my husband gets in the bed, and suddenly I am rolling into him. And I'm here. Or else I'm hanging under the edge of the bed trying not to fall into the middle. As I said, my husband weighs about 50 pounds more than I do. And so when he rolls into the bed, he rolled, it came within, most of these beds weren't that good, so he rolled in the middle. And then I couldn't stay up on the edge because the whole bed was tilting towards the middle. So it was like this. And I had no chance but to sleep right next to him. And it was uncomfortable after a while. I tried to, So there are reasons. You can get different beds that have different adjustments. There's all kinds of options. What happens if your husband snores? Maybe you spend a few minutes with him in the bed, and then you go someplace else. But if you're not going to be sleeping together, you need to figure out how are you going to have time to snuggle and cuddle. If sleeping together is a problem because the children sleep with you, then you need to learn. And I know people have actually stopped coaching with me because I've said this. You need to get the children to sleep in their own beds. How soon, people say? Well, that's going to be up to you guys. You and your husband, not just you deciding, but you and your husband. If you're a nursing mommy, then maybe your baby stays with you for a little while, and then get them in that little bassinet beside you, and then decide at what time is appropriate for them to move to their room. They will sleep better, and you and your husband have some time alone. One of the big things happens, too, that when kids are sleeping in the bed, the husband feels like he's deprived of his relationships with his wife. Many times we don't feel that way, women don't feel that way, but our husbands do. They feel like the kids have pushed them out of the house. And so I don't want you to feel that way. I don't want you to have that feeling. So learn to do that. If you've got little doggies or little kitties, make sure that they can sleep where you and your husband can still snuggle. If you've got big dogs, you probably need to find a place, teach them to sleep someplace else. Get them a soft doggy bed, maybe in your room, maybe outside the room. And here's a third thing, besides children and pets in the bed, that can actually destroy it. Sometimes the TV in the bedroom becomes the third person in the bedroom. We don't need that. We need to be sleeping soundly. Now, if you watch the TV together and you turn it off, or you do something like that, you have to figure that out, work that out. But making sure you're talking about these things. Remember that our sexual differences, preferences, and differences have to be worked out together. It's a together thing. And how we sleep has to be worked out together. But teach the kids to go to sleep on their own. Remember that when you're working with children, you're teaching them how to be adults. And if they always have to have mommy with them, then they're going to have to always have someone with them. And that leads to intimacy too soon, or relationships too soon with someone else in their life before they get married. They need to learn to sleep on their own. You need to learn to sleep with your husband if you don't. If you do, hallelujah, enjoy it, and find this time to snuggle and talk. Remembering that cuddling actually increases your sex life. It increases your healthiness, and it helps you get a better sleep. Okay, this has not been the easiest topic for me. If you have questions, please send me a text message. We don't really need all those in here, but we can talk about how can you get your 20 minutes of touching a day with your husband. It really does help. What can you do to improve your sleeping conditions? What can you do to sleep more often with your husband if you don't? What can you do if you do sleep with him to make it more comfortable for both of you? And how can you just get more sleep? You know, getting less than 7 hours of sleep a night leads to depression. But they've actually done studies that found when people are getting 6 or less hours of sleep a night, that they start to act like someone that has had a couple beers or a couple drinks. The reason is we start to lose control of our emotions. We lose, we get more clumsy. In other words, emotions, we get depressed, we yell, we get crankier, easier. We can't control ourselves. We make more impulsive decisions and more irrational decisions when we don't get enough sleep. You know, I need a lot of sleep, and I need my full 8 hours. And if I don't get it on a regular basis, I can really start to tell, because I will get some of those things. And often at nighttime, right before I go to bed, the whole world looks gloom and doom. Everything's going to be wrong because it's bedtime. And all I've learned to say, Joyce, you're sleepy. Go get some rest. If you have questions, send them to me. I'd love to chat with you about this topic. Remember, we're talking about the pros and cons of sleeping apart and sleeping together. Sleeping together is more healthy for your relationship. If you can't sleep together, then figure out how are you going to find time for intimacy. And you will probably have to schedule it. Schedule it? Joyce, you're kidding. Yes, I'm not. Yes, schedule it. If you need to sleep apart because of some health issues, then find time to schedule it. If you're sleeping together and it's not comfortable, figure out what you can do. How can you move the kids out of the bed? How can you get the pets out of the bed? This is not going to happen instantaneously. I know that. It's going to take some time. How do you cover up those windows that maybe are blocking your light? Or maybe you have too many other, maybe your phone's left on through the night. Maybe you need to turn it off. My husband has actually made a list on his that it will only ring through if our kids call or his brothers and sisters call. And so other than that, it doesn't ring. And then it has I don't know how he set it up, but you probably can, all you good gurus, or find a grandchild or a child or somebody and ask them how to fix your phone up to do that so it won't be ringing to you in the middle of the night. Or leave your phone on vibrate or whatever, or put it out in the kitchen or wherever you have it plug in. But get your rest. Sleeping is important. If you need to find one of those fancy beds that gets different adjustment for different people, different body weights or different preferences in sleeping, then maybe you get two different coverlets to put on it, and you put yours on and his on because you like different weights of coverlets. Maybe you need to save up for one of those fancy beds, or what my grandparents did, or my husband's parents did. They put plywood underneath Grandpa's side, and Grandma didn't have the plywood because he wanted a harder bed and she wanted a softer bed. There's ways. Get creative. Figure out how to solve those sleeping issues and get back in the bed together if at all possible. Remember, here's your challenge. 20 minutes a day touching. Doesn't matter how you touch. You don't have to do it all at once, but I want you to do it. 20 minutes a day touching and see how it changes your life and your marriage. If you have questions, send me a message on Facebook or send me an email. I guess I need to give my email if I'm going to say that. My email is joyce@joycezook.com. Pretty easy, joyce@joycezook.com. And we'll see if we can't help solve some of your issues. I'd love to see you love your life and love your marriage. And part of that is being able to get a good night's sleep and have great intimacy relationships with your husband. So, and someone said to me, one other question. Someone said, what if we had physical issues like back problems or we're recovering from surgery? Well, then just find a way to touch. I know my husband just recently had back surgery, and part of my touching was just sitting there rubbing his shoulder, making sure I went over and I kissed him and hugged him. And then he made a way of coming to snuggle with me for a little bit at night. It was very short, but we got to snuggle. Figure out what you could do. Touching is key to good, healthy relationships. Okay? This is Joyce Zook, helping you love your life and your marriage. God bless you. Thank you, Ron.